There are certain common mistakes that are made in life sciences, in both the examinations and in the formal assessments. And if we are aware of these and we try and help the learners, they are less likely to make these errors and therefore raise their results. So let's have a look and see what these common mistakes are. The first is that the learners don't demonstrate a proper level of understanding. Learners don't read the question correctly, and as a result, they often don't identify what sort of answer is actually required. Learners often don't answer on the correct cognitive level and tend to regurgitate facts rather than showing their level of understanding. Let's have a look at an example. In this particular example, learners should describe hypothyroidism and its effects. However, what they tend to do is focus on the symptoms of goiter. In this example, learners focused on the processes and named them, but they didn't name the systems. In the third example, many learners tended to add irrelevant information, such as the role of thermoregulation. All of that was required is the role of the blood vessels in their sweat glands. Now, how do we help and guide our learners so they don't make these mistakes? Well, the first is we need to emphasize the importance of both factual knowledge and the application of this knowledge to all the scenarios and examples. We need to discourage the regurgitation of facts, and we need to expose the learners to a variety of different questions and then coach them on how to approach these actual different questions. And most importantly, provide the learners with a list of keywords so we can explain to them what each of these mean. So they understand, for example, what does calculate mean, what does compare mean, examine, identify, and justify. And you'll notice that there is a list that you can download as a PDF document in this section of the course. The second common mistake is that learners don't plan their answer. They don't take the time to plan their answers correctly before they write them down. So often they make silly mistakes. Now, let's have a look at these examples. And we're not going to go through the long example, but it gives you the gist of it. You'll see at the end of this example, it says learners provided with a table showing results. Now, what happened was in this case, many learners only selected some of the data to use, which resulted in a weak and ineffective conclusion. The next example is the learners often chose information that was irrelevant in their answer. And in some cases, learners didn't give any examples at all. And where they did give examples, they mixed them up and didn't present them in a logical sequence. Now, how do we help the learners overcome this? Well, the first is to emphasize the importance of planning, both to avoid repetition and to answer the question correctly. We also need to demonstrate to learners how to structure an effective answer and emphasize the importance of the use of headings and subheadings. The third common mistake is that learners aren't able to draw and label a graph. Now, learners often struggle because they're not familiar with drawing line graphs and pie charts, and this grows across different subjects and many subjects that require this. Learners often don't label their graphs, and also learners don't label their graphs correctly. So where they have labeled them, the labels are incorrect. Let's have a look at an example. Now again, in this scenario, learners are given a table of data and they're asked to draw a graph. And what happens here is most learners demonstrate the ability to draw the graph. However, there's still marks being lost for the layout and the labeling of graphs. How do we help our learners and how do we guide them? Well, the first is make sure our learners are familiar with the different types of graphs. Give them lots of opportunities to work on different graphs in class. And they must practice drawing these graphs all the time. Emphasize the importance of becoming familiar with the layout of graphs and how to label them. Get them to practice the labels all the time as well. And most importantly, show the learners, emphasize which marks they're going to lose unnecessarily if they're not confident with their graphs. So we need to make sure that the learners understand their graphs need a caption, scale. Titles of both axes need to be there. They need to know what the units are and they need to plot and join the points correctly. The fourth mistake is that the learners are not able to distinguish between different types of content and different content. Learners struggle because they often give irrelevant content in an answer, and often learners confuse concepts and terminology. Now this example here shows you a number of terms that the learners just aren't familiar with, and they come up often in multiple choice questions, so the learners need to learn these and know what they mean. The next example In this case, the learners tend to write about everything they know about the topic and fail to select the correct content suitable to address the question. So they just suddenly see the nervous or the endocrine system and they write as much as they can about it instead of actually looking at what is needed in this question. Now, how do we help the learners? The first is we've got to emphasize the importance of understanding the facts and not just learning them off by heart. We've got to emphasize the importance of reading the question carefully, so they know what's actually required of them, and provide suitable examples in class of difficult concepts and different concepts so the learners are easily able to distinguish between terminology. Support the learners in identifying the appropriate factual information to support their answer. And most importantly, something that comes up all the time is emphasize the difference between reliability and validity. This should help the learners to improve their results.